At 38 years old, Tobin earned $172,000 a year as a senior portfolio analyst at Fidelity Investments in Boston. He was a man who understood value, risk, and the slow, steady accumulation of worth over time. He lived his life by the same principles he applied to the multi-million-dollar accounts he managed: discipline, foresight, and an unwavering belief in fundamental integrity. And on a cold Wednesday morning in March, at precisely 6:18 a.m., he discovered that his entire domestic portfolio, the life he had built with his wife, Kaleida, was catastrophically bankrupt. The devastating news had come 5 days earlier, a crackling, grief-stricken call from his Auntie Clara in Nassau. His mother, his vibrant, laughing mama, was gone. A sudden aneurysm, the doctors said. No warning, no time for goodbyes. The funeral was set for Thursday. Tobin, her only child, had to be there. He was the one who would deliver the eulogy, the one who would stand as the final testament to her legacy of love and resilience. The grief was a physical weight, a pressure behind his eyes, and a hollowness in his chest that no amount of deep breathing could fill. Now in the pre-dawn gloom of their Back Bay townhouse, that weight was compounded by a frantic, rising panic. His passport was gone. He had a dedicated place for it, a small, fireproof document safe tucked away in the back of his closet, behind a row of his neatly pressed suits. It was always there, alongside his birth certificate and his mother's old letters. But the small blue booklet was not in its designated slot. He felt for it again, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of the safe, then coming up empty. A cold knot of dread tightened in his stomach. His flight to Lynden Pindling International Airport was at 11:45 a.m. He checked his briefcase, a well-worn $450 Toomey he'd had for a decade, emptying its contents onto the plush, cream-colored wool carpet that Kaleida had insisted on. A $14,000 expense he'd argued against. Papers, his laptop, a half-eaten protein bar, no passport. He checked the pockets of the black suit he planned to wear, then the coat he'd worn home from the office the night before. Nothing. The entire situation felt surreal, a nightmarish logistical snag in the midst of profound heartbreak. He was a man who never lost things. He was organized, methodical. This didn't happen. And as the search grew more desperate, a sliver of an awful, unthinkable suspicion began to cut through his grief-addled mind. He looked toward the closed bedroom door, behind which Kaleida was still sleeping, and he had no idea how right he was. The foundation of his life was about to crumble into dust. What would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you in your darkest hour? We love hearing from our community, so share your thoughts in the comments below. Their life, on the surface, was the picture of Bostonian success. The $2.1 million townhouse on a quiet, tree-lined street in Back Bay was Tobin's, purchased with a down payment from his own premarital savings and a small inheritance from his grandfather years before he'd even met Kaleida. It was his anchor, a tangible result of his disciplined financial life. But inside, it was entirely her domain. Where Tobin saw history and solid bones, Kaleida saw a canvas for her expensive tastes. She curated their life as if for a magazine spread, each object a testament to a certain kind of wealth. There was the sprawling white leather sofa in the living room, a $12,000 piece from Roche-Beaubois that was beautiful to look at but stiff and uncomfortable to actually sit on. Tobin preferred the worn leather armchair in his small study, a $600 piece he'd bought himself after college, the place where he read the Wall Street Journal every morning. Kaleida's wardrobe was a rotating collection of designer labels, a constant stream of packages arriving from Net-a-Porter and Saks. A $2,400 Burberry trench coat for the unpredictable Boston spring. A collection of Jimmy Choo heels starting at $750 a pair. A closet organized by color and season. smelling faintly of a $340 Tom Ford perfume. Tobin, by contrast, owned 3 good suits for work, rotated them dutifully, and wore an $89 Timex watch his mother had given him for his 30th birthday. The battery had been replaced 4 times. The contrast was a quiet, constant hum beneath the surface of their marriage. Tobin managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions, yet he packed his own lunch 4 out of 5 days a week. Simple turkey on whole wheat, an apple, a yogurt. It saved him $20 a day, over $4,000 a year, which he dutifully invested. Kaleida thought it was embarrassing. "Tobin, you're a senior analyst, not an intern," she'd said once, wrinkling her nose as he assembled his sandwich in their gleaming $80,000 Pog and Pole kitchen. "Just buy lunch, live a little." To Tobin, living a little meant maxing out his 401k and ensuring his financial independence. To Kaleida, it meant a last-minute weekend trip to Miami, staying at the Fontainebleau for $1,200 a night. He had tried to believe their differences were complementary. He was the stable ground. She was the vibrant, unpredictable sky. He was a black man who had built his success brick by careful brick, deeply aware of the value of security and the fragility of wealth. His mother, a formidable woman who had worked as a head nurse in Nassau for 40 years, had instilled in him a profound sense of responsibility. "Don't just make money, son," she used to say on their weekly calls. "Make a life. They aren't the same thing." Kaleida, who came from a family of moderate means, but had always aspired to more, seemed to believe they were exactly the same thing. Her happiness was visibly tied to acquisitions. The new Peloton bike, $2,495, plus the $44 monthly subscription, brought her joy for 3 weeks before it became a silent, sculptural clothes rack in the guest room. The series of abstract paintings she bought for the hallway, a $9,000 indulgence from a gallery on Newbury Street, were meant to make her feel something. But within a month, she didn't seem to notice them at all. Tobin noticed. He noticed the credit card bills, the casual, frictionless way she spent the money he so carefully earned. He paid the bills without complaint, telling himself it was the price of a peaceful home. He was wrong. It was the price of a fragile, hollow facade, and the bill was about to come due. The first crack in that facade appeared a week ago, the Tuesday after his mother's death. Tobin was sitting at the antique mahogany desk in his study, a glass of water untouched beside him. He was trying to write down memories of his mother for the eulogy, but the words wouldn't come. His mind was a thick fog of shock and sorrow. Kaleida walked in, not with a cup of tea or a comforting hand on his shoulder, but with her iPad glowing in her hands. She was wearing a pink silk pajama set, a $600 ensemble from La Perla. "Tobin, honey, I know this is a hard time," she began, her voice a little too bright for the somber mood in the room. "But I had an idea that might actually be, well, perfect." He looked up, his eyes gritty from lack of sleep. "An idea?" "For the Bahamas," she said, pulling up a web page for a luxury resort in Nassau. The screen showed a pristine white beach, turquoise water, and smiling people holding colorful drinks. "I was thinking, since you have to go down there anyway, what if I got the girls together and we came too? We could make it a trip. We wouldn't get in your way, of course. We'd stay at the Cove, do some spa days, a little shopping. It would be a nice distraction for you afterwards, and flights are surprisingly cheap right now." Tobin stared at her, then at the iPad, then back at her. He felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if they were speaking 2 different languages. A distraction? Spa days? His mother was gone. He was going home to bury her. "Kaleida," he said, his voice low and strained, "I'm going to my mother's funeral." "I know that," she said. a hint of impatience creeping into her tone. She swiped through photos of the resort's infinity pool. But life doesn't stop, does it? Your mom wouldn't want you to just be miserable. We could have a nice dinner, just the two of us after the service, to celebrate her life. Celebrate her life with a mojito by an infinity pool? The disconnect was staggering. No, he said, the word coming out sharper than he intended. Absolutely not. It's completely inappropriate. Her face hardened. The performative sympathy vanished, replaced by a familiar, petulant glare. Inappropriate? Tobin, I'm trying to be supportive. I'm trying to find a silver lining here. For us? For me to support you. Support me? He asked, his voice rising despite his effort to control it. Support would be helping me book a flight for my Auntie Clara's sister to come in from Freeport. Support would be asking me if I've eaten today. It would not be planning a goddamn vacation around my mother's burial. Oh, here we go, she scoffed, snapping the iPad cover shut. The righteous suffering son. You know, for someone who manages millions, you have no concept of seizing an opportunity. This is a chance for me to be there, in the same country as you while you're going through this. It's a chance for you to get a tan, he shot back, the raw grief making him careless. Her eyes narrowed into slits. You know what, Tobin? Your problem is that you always put your family first. It's always about your mother, your auntie, your precious roots. When is it ever going to be about me? About our life? She stood up, the silk pajamas rustling. Maybe you need a reminder of what's actually important, what's right here in front of you. She stormed out of the study, leaving him shaking with a mixture of anger and profound, aching loneliness. He had no idea that her parting shot was not just a threat, but a promise. The cruelty escalated over the next few days. She gave him the silent treatment, communicating only through clipped, one-word answers. While he was on the phone with the funeral home in Nassau, discussing the cost of the casket, $3,500, and the service, she walked through the living room, talking loudly on her own phone to a friend. I mean, can you believe it? He's so selfish. It's like my feelings don't matter at all, she said, making sure he could hear every word. Tobin pressed the phone tighter to his ear, his knuckles white, and tried to focus on the director's sympathetic voice. The night before his flight, he was on a video call with his Auntie Clara. Her face, etched with the same grief he felt, was a small, pixelated comfort on his screen. They were talking about his mother's love for her garden, the hibiscus and bougainvillea she tended with such care. Suddenly, from off-screen in his own living room, Kalida's voice sliced through the quiet moment. Tobin, are you going to be on that call all night? Some of us are trying to watch television. He didn't even have the television on. It was a calculated jab, a power play designed to humiliate him in front of his family. Auntie Clara's face fell. Tobin, baby, you go? She said softly. We can talk tomorrow when you get here. No, Auntie, it's fine, he said, his jaw tight. He turned his head. Kalida, I'm talking to my aunt. Could you give me a few minutes of privacy? She let out a short, derisive laugh. Privacy? In my own living room? Don't be ridiculous. She walked over to the soundbar and turned on a playlist of loud, thumping pop music, filling the room with a synthetic beat that felt like an assault. It was so petty, so deliberately unkind, that Tobin was momentarily stunned into silence. He looked back at the screen, at his aunt's sad, tired eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'll call you from the airport. He ended the call, the silence in his study now ringing with the echo of her contempt. He sat there for a long time, the music from the other room a soundtrack to his unraveling marriage. The outrage was a slow-burning fire in his gut. What she didn't know was that with every cruel word, with every dismissive gesture, she wasn't just pushing him away, she was handing him the very tools he would need to dismantle the life she prized so highly. The search ended at 6:47 a.m. Tobin had torn his closet apart. Suits were slung over chairs, shoes were kicked into a pile. He'd checked every pocket, every bag, every drawer. The small safe was open and empty. He finally walked into the master bedroom. Kalita was awake now, sitting up in their king-sized bed, a $7,000 monstrosity with a tufted headboard. She was scrolling through her phone, a picture of serene indifference. A steady, miserable rain had begun to fall outside, streaking the large windows that overlooked the quiet Boston street. "I can't find my passport," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He was past panic now, adrift in a cold, clear sea of certainty. "Oh?" she said, not looking up from her phone. She liked a photo on Instagram. "That's a shame. Where did you last see it?" "It's always in the safe, Kalita. You know that. It's not there." She finally lowered her phone, her expression a careful blank. "Well, I'm sure it will turn up. You're probably just stressed and misplacing things." He took a step closer to the bed. The air in the room was thick, heavy. He could feel his heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against his ribs. "Did you move it?" She feigned a look of surprise. "Me? Why would I move your passport? That's your important document." The way she said important document was laced with a faint, mocking tone. He just looked at her. He didn't blink. He said nothing. He let the silence stretch. Let it fill the space between them. He watched her carefully constructed mask of innocence begin to twitch at the edges. Her composure wavered under his steady, silent gaze. She was used to him arguing, pleading, explaining. She wasn't prepared for this unnerving stillness. Finally, she broke. A triumphant, ugly smirk crept onto her face. She thought she had won. "All right, fine," she said, tossing her $1,200 iPhone onto the $800 duvet. "Yes, I have it." The words landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. Tobin felt something inside him snap. It wasn't a loud, violent break, but a clean, quiet fracture. The final support beam of their marriage giving way. He felt nothing. It was the lack of feeling that scared him most. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She swung her legs out of bed, standing up to face him. She was wearing the pink silk pajamas again. She crossed her arms, a posture of defiant self-righteousness. "I needed to prove a point, Tobin," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You needed a wake-up call, a real-world consequence. You were going to choose your dead mother over your living wife. You were going to leave me here, after I tried to make a nice plan for us, and run off to the Bahamas to wallow in your grief. I decided you needed to be here, with me, to work on us, to see what's actually important." He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time in years. The cruelty wasn't a bug. It was a feature. It was the core of her operating system. To use his mother's death, his grief, as leverage in a petty power game. It was monstrous. It was unforgivable. "You think this," he said, gesturing vaguely at her, at the expensive room, at their life, "is more important than me burying my mother?" "I think we are," she corrected him, her chin jutting out. "Our marriage, our future, and yes, sometimes that means making hard choices. I made one for you. You'll thank me later when you realize I was right." She was waiting for him to explode, to yell, to beg her for the passport. She was anticipating a scene, a dramatic confrontation where she held all the power. Tobin did none of those things. He simply looked at her, a long, searching look that seemed to pass right through her and see the empty space beyond. He saw the beautiful, expensive shell and the profound moral vacancy within. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice still quiet, but now edged with something hard and cold as steel. "I'm not going to tell you," she said, smiling her smug little smile. "Not until you cancel your flight and sit down and talk to me, properly, about our priorities." He held her gaze for 1 second longer. Then he turned without another word and walked out of the bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. He heard her call after him, "Tobin, where are you going? We're not done talking about this." He didn't answer. He walked into his study and shut that door too. The sound of the latch clicking into place was the sound of the end. She thought she had trapped him. She had no idea she had just set him free. In the sterile quiet of his study, with the sound of the Boston rain tapping against the window pane, Tobin moved with a chilling, newfound clarity. Grief was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but it was now overlaid with a layer of ice-cold resolve. The emotional, chaotic part of his brain had shut down. The analyst had taken over. He sat down at his desk, opened his MacBook Pro, $2,399, and began to solve the problem. His fingers flew across the keyboard. A quick search. Emergency Passport Boston. The first result was the U.S. Department of State website for the Boston Passport Agency, located in the Tip O'Neill Federal Building downtown. It listed services for customers with life or death emergencies. Travel within 3 business days for an immediate family member's death abroad. This was his situation. The website stated he needed proof of the emergency, his travel itinerary, a completed application form, a photo, and proof of citizenship. He had all of it. His flight itinerary was in his email. His birth certificate was in the safe Kaleida thought she controlled. He could print the form, and there was a CVS a block away that took passport photos. The fee was the standard $190 plus a $60 expedite fee, a total of $250. A laugh, dry and humorless, escaped his lips. Kaleida had built a prison for him that cost a mere $250 to escape. He booked the earliest available appointment online, 9:30 a.m. He printed the form DS-82, filled it out with a steady hand, and then found the email from his aunt containing a digital copy of his mother's death certificate. He printed that too, along with his flight confirmation. He slipped the documents into a manila folder. Next, he opened a new browser tab. He typed the name of a law firm, a name he'd filed away months ago when a colleague at Fidelity, a man named Marcus, had gone through a particularly nasty divorce. "She tried to take everything," Marcus had said over a lunch they both knew Tobin could afford to buy. "But Helen Croft saved my life. She's not cheap, but she's a shark. A very calm, very precise shark." He found the firm's website, Helen Croft, Esquire. Her picture showed a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that tolerated no nonsense. Her bio listed her specialties: complex asset division and high net worth spousal disputes. Her billing rate was listed at $1,200 per hour. Tobin didn't hesitate. He called the number. A crisp, professional voice answered, "Law offices of Croft and Gable." "I'd like to speak with Helen Croft," Tobin said. "My name is Tobin Williams. I'm a referral from Marcus Thorne." There was a brief pause. The name clearly carried weight. "One moment, Mr. Williams." A minute later, Helen Croft's voice was on the line. It was exactly as he'd imagined. Calm, controlled, and deeply intelligent. "Mr. Williams, Marcus speaks highly of you. What can I do for you?" Tobin, in the same flat, emotionless tone he'd used with Kaleida, laid out the situation in 10 sentences. The imminent funeral, the hidden passport, the wife's admission, the pattern of financial and emotional manipulation. He spoke like he was delivering a market report, facts, figures, and a clear statement of the problem. There was a short silence on the other end. "Mr. Williams," Helen said, her voice holding a new note of grim respect. "This is not just grounds for divorce. This is what we call extreme cruelty. The court will not look kindly upon it, especially given the circumstances." "Good," Tobin said. "I want a file, immediately." "I require a retainer of $25,000 to begin proceedings," she stated. "My team can have the petition for dissolution drafted by tomorrow afternoon. We'll need to detail your assets. Are they complex?" "No," Tobin said. "They are simple. The townhouse is premarital, fully in my name. My Fidelity equity, currently valued at $1.57 million, is also premarital. Our joint assets are minimal. A shared checking account with a balance of roughly $15,000 and the contents of the house she decorated." "Excellent," Helen said, a hint of what sounded like satisfaction in her voice. "This will be straightforward. Wire the retainer and send my paralegal, John, copies of your premarital property deeds and brokerage statements. We will handle the rest. I recommend you do not engage with your wife further. Go to your mother's funeral. Grieve. Let us do the work. We will be ready to serve the papers upon your return. You just tell us when and where." "Monday morning," Tobin said, without hesitation. "At our home, 7:30 a.m. Consider it done, Mr. Williams. And for what it's worth, I am very sorry for your loss." The call ended. Tobin immediately logged into his personal Fidelity account, the one Kaleida had no access to, and wired the $25,000. It was the best money he had ever spent. He gathered his papers, stood up, and walked out of the study. He grabbed a raincoat from the hall closet, walked past the closed bedroom door, and left the house without a sound. The quiet click of the front door echoing in the silent, expensive tomb of his marriage. The hours that followed were a study in methodical motion. Tobin walked the 2 blocks to the CVS on Boylston Street, the cold rain seeping into the collar of his jacket. Inside, under the flat fluorescent lights, he stood against the sterile white backdrop for his passport photo. The technician, a young kid with headphones around his neck, told him to look straight ahead. "No smiling," the kid said. Tobin's face in the resulting pictures was a grim, emotionless mask. It was perfect. The photos cost $16.99. From there, he took an Uber, a simple Toyota Camry, the 12-minute ride to the Tip O'Neill Federal Building. He didn't want to take his own car, a modest Audi A4 from the garage. He didn't want any part of his old routine. He was already severing the ties. During the ride, his phone buzzed. A text from Kaleida. "Are you seriously just leaving? We need to talk about this, Tobin. This is childish." He read the message and felt nothing. He deleted it without replying. The passport agency was a place of quiet, bureaucratic desperation. People clutched folders of documents, their faces etched with anxiety. Tobin, however, felt a strange sense of calm. He had a plan. He was executing it. He took a number and sat in one of the hard plastic chairs. His phone buzzed again. "I can't believe you. After everything I do for you, this is how you repay me by running away?" He deleted it. And again. "I'm going to be late for my Pilates class. Where did you go?" Delete. When his number was called, he approached the thick glass window. He presented his documents to the federal employee. The signed DS-82 form, the old passport number, the new photos, his birth certificate, his mother's death certificate, and his flight itinerary. The woman on the other side of the glass reviewed them with a practiced, efficient air. She looked at the death certificate, then up at Tobin, her expression softening with a flicker of human sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir," she said quietly. "Please have a seat. We'll call you when it's ready. It should be about 4 hours." Tobin sat back down. He didn't read. He didn't scroll through his phone. He just sat, watching the rain fall on the city outside, his mind a quiet, orderly space. He was grieving his mother. He was mourning the woman he thought he had married. But he was not panicking. He was not trapped. At 10:52 a.m., his phone rang. It was Kaleida. He let it go to voicemail. The transcript popped up a minute later. "Tobin, this is ridiculous. Pick up the phone. I'm not playing this game. You're going to miss your flight, and it will be your own fault for acting like a baby. I did this for us. Can't you see that? Call me." He stared at the words, "It will be your own fault." The complete, breathtaking lack of self-awareness was its own kind of marvel. He was an analyst. He assessed risk. He evaluated character. How had he gotten this so profoundly wrong for so long? At 1:15 p.m., his name was called. He walked back to the window. The woman handed him a new, crisp blue passport booklet. He opened it. There was his grim, unsmiling face, a man on the precipice. He slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. The feeling was not triumph. It was something quieter, heavier. It was the feeling of a terrible, necessary amputation. He took another Uber directly to Logan Airport. As he stood in the security line, his phone rang again. Kaleida. He answered it this time, a sudden, cold impulse guiding him. "Tobin, finally, where are you? Are you coming home?" Her voice was a mix of exasperation and relief. She still thought she was in control. "No," he said, his voice even. "No? What do you mean, no? Where are you?" He was at the front of the line, placing his briefcase in a gray bin. "I'm at the airport." There was a stunned silence. "What? The airport? How? Your passport?" "I found it," he lied, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "It was in an old coat pocket. Silly me." He could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the confusion, the frustration that her grand gesture had been thwarted by a simple, mundane mistake. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Well, see, all that drama for nothing. I told you it would turn up." "You did," he said. The TSA agent waved him through the scanner. "I have to go. I'm boarding." "Wait, Tobin?" She started, but he hung up. He walked to his gate, his new passport a heavy, solid weight in his pocket. He sat down and waited for his flight, the lie he had told, a necessary, temporary bridge to a future she could not even begin to imagine. He was playing dumb, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like the smartest man in the room. The flight to Nassau was a 5-hour suspension between two worlds. Tobin stared out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, the grief for his mother washing over him in waves. In the sanitized air of the cabin, away from the oppressive atmosphere of his house, he could finally let the sorrow in. A tear escaped his eye and traced a cold path down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. It was a tribute to his mama, a woman of immense warmth and strength whose love was the bedrock of his entire life. The contrast between her selfless character and his wife's calculated selfishness was a chasm that could never be crossed. He landed in Nassau as the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The warm, humid air that greeted him as he stepped off the plane was the air of his childhood. It smelled of sea salt and blooming flowers. His Auntie Clara was waiting for him just past customs. She was a smaller, softer version of his mother, with the same kind eyes. She wrapped him in a fierce hug, and in her arms, Tobin finally let out a shuddering breath he felt like he'd been holding for a week. "He's home," she whispered, as much to herself as to him. "Mama's boy is home." The next day, Thursday, was the funeral. It wasn't a somber, weeping affair in the way a Boston service might have been. It was a homegoing, a celebration. The church was filled with the sound of gospel music, of joyous singing that rattled the windows and seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Friends and family from all over the island, people Tobin had known his whole life, stood up and told stories about his mother. They spoke of her legendary conch salad, her booming laugh, her habit of giving brutally honest but deeply loving advice. They painted a portrait of a woman who was the heart of her community, a pillar of strength and grace. When it was Tobin's turn to speak, he stood at the pulpit and looked out at the sea of loving, familiar faces. He didn't read from the notes he'd tried to write in Boston. He just spoke from his heart. He spoke of her hands always busy, tending her garden or checking a patient's pulse. He spoke of her voice on the phone. A weekly dose of unconditional love and sanity. He spoke of her unwavering belief in him. "My mother taught me that your character is the only asset you truly own," he said, his voice thick with emotion but steady. "Everything else can be lost. Your house, your money, your job, but your integrity, who you are when no one is watching, that is yours forever." As he spoke the words, he knew with absolute certainty what he had to do. He was not just eulogizing his mother, he was reaffirming his own moral compass. He spent Friday and Saturday surrounded by family. He helped Auntie Clara in his mother's garden, pulling weeds from around the vibrant hibiscus bushes. He sat on the porch with his uncles, listening to them tell stories. He ate fried fish and peas and rice until he was full. He received a few texts from Kaleida. "Hope the service was okay." "Let me know when you're heading back," he replied with a simple, "will do." Another text, "I booked a reservation at Contessa for Monday night to welcome you home." 7 p.m. He read the text and felt a deep, weary sadness. She was already trying to paper over the chasm with a $300 dinner. She had no idea she was standing on the edge of a cliff. He flew back to Boston on Saturday evening, arriving at the townhouse just after 9 p.m. The house was spotless, and the scent of a diptyque candle, a $72 baize, hung in the air. Kaleida greeted him at the door with a hesitant smile and a kiss on the cheek that he did not return. She had prepared a welcome home meal, an elaborate roast chicken. She chattered on about her week, about a friend's drama, about the gala she wanted to attend. She was acting as if nothing had happened, as if her monstrous act of cruelty had been a minor disagreement, now forgotten. Tobin played along. He was polite, quiet, and distant. He answered her questions with short, non-committal answers. He claimed he was exhausted from the trip and the emotional toll, which was true. He went to bed before 10 p.m., sleeping in the guest room. "I just need some space," he said, when she looked at him with a confused, hurt expression. "I'm still processing." Monday morning arrived, gray and overcast. At 7:15 a.m., Tobin was in the kitchen, dressed in one of his work suits. He was calmly drinking a cup of black coffee. Kaleida came down a few minutes later, wearing a white silk robe. She poured herself a coffee, adding a precise amount of cream and sugar. She leaned against the $15,000 marble island, scrolling through her phone. "So, Contessa tonight, right?" she said, her voice bright. "I'm thinking of wearing my new blue dress, the one from Valentino." It was a $4,500 dress he knew was sitting in their closet with the tags still on. Tobin took a slow sip of his coffee. He looked at the clock on the oven. 7:29 a.m. "We should talk about that," he said, his voice perfectly even. Just then the doorbell rang, a sharp, clear chime that cut through the domestic quiet. Kaleida frowned. Who could that be at this hour? She walked to the front door, peering through the peephole. "I don't recognize him." She opened the door a few inches. A man in a nondescript windbreaker stood on their granite steps. "Are you Kaleida Williams?" the man asked, his voice neutral. "Yes," she said, her voice laced with suspicion. The man handed her a thick, 9 by 12-inch manila envelope. "You've been served," he said, then turned and walked briskly down the steps. Kalida stared at the envelope in her hand, then back at Tobin, who hadn't moved from his spot in the kitchen. "What is this?" she asked, a tremor of unease in her voice. She walked back to the island, tearing open the seal. Her eyes scanned the first page. He watched as the color drained from her face. Her perfectly made-up, confident expression dissolved into a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The papers trembled in her hand. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Petition? For dissolution of marriage?" she whispered, the words alien in her mouth. "Irreconcilable differences? Extreme cruelty? Tobin, what is this? Is this some kind of sick joke?" Tobin took one last slow sip of his coffee and placed the mug gently in the sink. He looked directly at her, his expression not angry, not sad, just final. The stillness she had found so unnerving a few days ago had now returned, but this time it was imbued with the absolute power of his decision. "No," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the immense weight of consequence. "It's not a joke." He paused, letting the reality of the situation settle into the space between them. "I'm proving a point." The aftermath was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, systematic collapse. Kalida's world, built on the foundation of Tobin's income and stability, disintegrated piece by painful piece. The consequences were not an act of Tobin's cruelty, but the direct, enumerated results of her own. First came the voicemails. They started an hour after Tobin left for work, having packed a small overnight bag from the guest room. The first message, left at 8:45 a.m., was pure confusion. "Tobin, I don't understand. This is a mistake, right? Your lawyer made a mistake. Call me. We need to clear this up." The second, at 10:12 a.m., was laced with justification and burgeoning anger. "Okay, I get it, you're mad. But divorce? Isn't that a little extreme? I did what I did for us, to save our marriage. And this is how you thank me? By trying to destroy it? This is so unbelievably dramatic even for you." By 2:30 p.m., after she had spoken to the divorce attorney her friend recommended, a lawyer who likely explained the legal definition of extreme cruelty and the precariousness of her position regarding Tobin's premarital assets, the tone shifted to pleading. "Tobin, baby, please. We can talk about this. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I went too far. I see that now. Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we have." The final voicemail of the day, left just after 5 p.m., was just her ragged, desperate sobs. There were no words. Tobin listened to each message once, his face impassive, then deleted them. They were data points. Evidence of a character he no longer wished to analyze. He forwarded them to Helen Croft with the subject line, "For your records." The first legal consequence was the most immediate. Helen filed a motion for exclusive use of the marital home, citing Kalida's behavior as creating an untenable living situation. Given that the $2.1 million townhouse was Tobin's premarital property, the judge granted it swiftly. Kalida was given 30 days to vacate. She was forced to move from the historic, elegant streets of Back Bay to a cramped, $2,800 per month one-bedroom apartment in Alston, a neighborhood filled with students, and the noise of the city she now had to face on her own terms. Next came the financial reckoning. Kalida's lawyer, realizing the weakness of their position, attempted to argue for a significant portion of Tobin's fidelity equity, claiming her emotional support contributed to his career success. Helen Croft systematically dismantled this argument in a single motion, pointing to Kalida's documented actions as emotional sabotage, not support. The court agreed. The premarital assets were ironclad. Tobin kept his townhouse. He kept every penny of his $1.57 million in Fidelity stock. The only assets subject to division were those accrued during their 4-year marriage. This amounted to the $15,000 in their joint checking account and a handful of other minor investments, totaling approximately $176,000. Her half was $88,000. After paying her own legal fees, which amounted to a staggering $65,000, Kaleida walked away from her marriage to a senior fidelity analyst with just $23,000. The social consequences were just as brutal. Her circle of friends had been tethered to Tobin's status and the lifestyle he provided. The invitations to charity galas, the weekend trips to Nantucket, the dinners at high-end restaurants, they all evaporated. When she could no longer host parties in the beautiful Back Bay townhouse or split the cost of a table at a benefit, her phone grew quiet. She had to sell her white BMW 3 Series, a car with a $43,000 price tag, to cover her first few months of rent and living expenses. She was seen driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper. The designer clothes, the Valentino and Burberry, hung in her new, small closet like relics from another life, completely out of place in her new reality. She had built her identity on a scaffolding of wealth she did not earn, and when it was removed, there was nothing left to hold her up. She had proven her point, that she mattered most. The world, in turn, showed her exactly how much she mattered on her own. 2 years passed. The city of Boston cycled through the seasons, its harsh winters giving way to glorious, sun-drenched summers. For Tobin, it was a time of quiet, intentional rebuilding. He was no longer just an analyst, he was the architect of his own life. The pain of his mother's death had softened into a warm, cherished memory, a guiding star rather than an open wound. The bitterness of his divorce had faded completely, replaced by a profound sense of peace and gratitude for his freedom. He was running. It was a new ritual, one he started in the months after Kaleida moved out. Every morning, just as the sun began to rise over the city, he would leave his townhouse and run along the Charles River Esplanade. The rhythmic pounding of his feet on the pavement, the cool air in his lungs, the sight of the water reflecting the morning light. It was his meditation. It was where he processed his thoughts and set his intentions for the day. His deep brown skin, which had seemed sallow and tired during the last year of his marriage, was now luminous and healthy in the early morning sun. He had been promoted at Fidelity. He was now a vice president, managing his own division, with a new salary of $280,000 a year. But the numbers, which had once been his sole professional focus, now felt secondary. His real passion was a new mentorship program he had founded within the company. He took a group of young, hungry analysts under his wing, most of them people of color, bright minds from backgrounds that didn't traditionally feed into the world of high finance. He taught them about asset allocation and risk management, yes, but he also taught them what his mother had taught him. He taught them about character. Your reputation is your most valuable holding, he told a young black woman named Maya during one of their weekly meetings. It appreciates over time if you manage it with integrity, and a single bad decision can wipe it out. Protect it above all else. The townhouse, once a stage for Kaleida's performative wealth, had been transformed. He sold the stiff Roche-Beaubois sofa and the soulless abstract art. He replaced them with comfortable, well-made furniture, shelves filled with books, and in the place of honor above the fireplace, a large, beautifully framed photograph of his mother, laughing in her garden in Nassau. The house was no longer a showroom, it was a home. It felt warm, lived in, and authentic. It felt like him. One crisp autumn afternoon, he met a woman named Imani. She was an architect, introduced by a mutual friend. They met for coffee at a small cafe in the South End. She had kind, intelligent eyes and a laugh that was genuine and easy. She talked about her passion for designing community spaces, for creating buildings that served people, not just egos. She asked him about his work, but she seemed more interested in his mentorship program than his portfolio's performance. He found himself talking for hours, telling her about his mother, about Nassau, about his morning runs. She listened, truly listened. Their second date was a walk through the public garden. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as they strolled past the swan boats. He learned she volunteered at a community garden, that she loved the feel of soil on her hands. She wore a simple, elegant dress and no flashy jewelry. He wore his old Timex watch. At one point, as they stood on the small bridge, she reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm, firm, and real. It felt like an anchor. It felt like peace. He never saw Kalida again, but he heard about her once, through his old colleague Marcus. She had moved to Florida, was working in retail, and was struggling. He felt a brief, distant pang of sadness for the person she might have been, but it passed quickly. Her choices were her own. His forgiveness was not for her, it was for him. It was the final closing of a painful chapter, the last asset he needed to divest from his life's portfolio. True wealth, he had come to understand, has nothing to do with the numbers on a brokerage statement or the square footage of a house. It isn't something you can buy or display. True wealth is integrity. It's the love of family that holds you up in your darkest hour. It's the peace of a quiet morning run and the satisfaction of meaningful work. It's the freedom to be yourself, unapologetically. And it's the profound, simple joy of holding hands with someone who sees you, honors you, and values your character above all else. That is the portfolio that never loses its worth. What does true wealth mean to you? Share your definition of a rich life in the comments below, and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding strength in authenticity.